This intern thought her summer job would be boring until her coworker kept accidentally flaunting something that made her skin crawl. She finally snapped and got him fired, but now she's the one being treated like the villain. Did she go too far, or is this exactly the wake-up call that Office needed? And that's just the beginning. Today's lineup is packed with surprise proposals gone horribly wrong, jealous sisters with a taste for destruction, and a woman who had to mace her best friend's boyfriend. No exaggeration, this is pure AITA chaos. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to AITA Chronicles, where we dive into the messiest Reddit AITA stories every single day. And today's batch, they're absolutely unhinged. If you're into high-stakes drama, emotional betrayals, and stories that'll make you pause and say, wait, what did I just hear? You're in the right place. We're on a mission to hit 10K subscribers, and every one of you who likes, comments, or subscribes is helping us get there. So thank you, seriously. Now grab a drink, settle in, and let's jump right into this wild ride. Am I the asshole for getting my coworker fired for his repeated visible dick print? The writer, a 19-year-old intern, young, new to the workforce, and just trying to get through each day. Never expected her part-time internship to turn into something so uncomfortable, and honestly, disturbing. Her office had a relaxed dress code. People wore what they wanted. Jeans, sweatpants, the usual casual fare. It should have been a chill environment. But one morning, while she was working alone in a room, her older coworker Josh, late 20s, came over to chat. Just casual small talk, right? Until she turned to face him. And there it was. An unmistakable, completely unmissable outline of his erection. Thin sweatpants, no attempt to adjust, no shame, nothing left to the imagination. Ryder didn't say anything, she froze. And after he left, she tried to shake it off. Maybe it was a fluke. Maybe it was just unfortunate timing. So she got back to work thinking it'll pass. But it didn't. It kept happening. Josh started showing up more. Always alone, always when no one else was around. Each time, same thing. Thin shorts, flimsy pants, and always that same inappropriate in-your-face situation. And let's be honest here, this wasn't coincidence. This wasn't some wardrobe malfunction. He wasn't walking around like that in front of anyone else, just Ryder, every single time. Still, she kept her head down. She didn't want to be that girl, the dramatic one, the intern who stirred things up. So she said nothing, swallowed the discomfort, tried to play it cool. But then Josh started talking, saying things that turned this already tense situation into something deeply unsettling. Oh, it's hot out, had to wear these shorts today. And then one day he casually invites her to his apartment for lunch. She politely declines, trying not to make it weird. But as he walks off, he mutters, "All right, I've got to go to the bathroom to take care of something. See you around," with a glance downward. That was it. That was the moment the line was crossed. Not just creepy, not just uncomfortable, intentional. Ryder went straight to HR. She laid it all out, every incident, every inappropriate encounter. To their credit, HR took it seriously. Josh was placed under review and eventually fired with cause. But instead of support, Ryder got ice. Coworkers started acting distant. Someone made a sarcastic remark about wearing proper pants today while others snickered. Her boss? Suddenly cold. Conversations shorter, smiles less frequent. And now, Ryder's stuck wondering, am I the asshole for speaking up? Here's the thing. What Josh did wasn't just uncomfortable, it was calculated. He targeted the Ryder when no one else was around. He escalated it. He used his position, age, and presence to push boundaries, to create tension. And he wasn't subtle. She gave him multiple chances to stop. She didn't go nuclear right away. She stayed silent, gave him benefit of the doubt. But at some point, silence stops being strength and becomes a shield for someone else's behavior. And yet, now she's the outcast. That's the part that stings. When the system punishes the one who speaks up, it sends a message, and not a good one. It's no wonder people stay quiet. So no, Ryder, you are not the asshole. You stood up for yourself in a place where you should have felt safe, and if anyone's making you feel guilty for that, they're not worth your time. This isn't about pants. This is about power, and you took yours back. What do you think? Was HR right to fire Josh? Was the Ryder right to speak up when others wouldn't? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This one's going to spark a lot of debate. Am I the asshole for destroying my best friend's proposal because I believed she was being kidnapped? This all went down last weekend, and the writer, still reeling, can barely believe it happened. I mean, this was supposed to be a simple visit, just two best friends catching up. But what started as a casual walk turned into something straight out of a nightmare, or maybe a comedy sketch gone horribly wrong. The writer, 28 years old, was visiting her best friend Emily, who's 29. They've been close for years, ride or die kind of close. And while she's always supported Emily's long-term relationship with Chris, 31, she admits Chris has always been a bit much, you know the type, loves the big gestures. Flash mobs in public, elaborate, overly thought-out surprises, scavenger hunts that last way too long. That guy. So here they are, Ryder and Emily, walking through town, just chatting, laughing, everything normal, until it wasn't. Out of nowhere, a white van, yes, an actual unmarked white van, pulls up next to them. The door swings open, two men in masks jump out, and they grab Emily. She screams. Not laughs, not gasps, screams. What would you think in that moment? Ryder doesn't hesitate. She whips out her pepper spray, starts yelling, fighting, kicking, doing everything in her power to protect her best friend from what she believes is a literal kidnapping attempt. And she's not being dramatic here. This looked real, felt real. No movie magic, no script. She sprays one man in the face, kicks another, and yanks Emily back by her coat, all while yelling for someone to call 911. The chaos that follows is almost unbelievable. Turns out it was Chris, and the masked men, his buddies, the van, part of his grand plan. Because apparently this was his idea of a romantic cinematic proposal, a prank kidnapping leading up to popping the question. Because what screams lifelong love like trauma? Chris is on the ground, yelling, half-blinded, crying from the pepper spray. Emily's shaking, police are arriving, and the writer, still holding the pepper spray, heart pounding, trying to process the fact that she just assaulted the groom-to-be because she thought her best friend was being trafficked. Now, here's where the guilt creeps in. Chris is furious, says Ryder ruined one of the most important moments of their lives and humiliated him. Emily, bless her, says she gets why Ryder freaked out, but that she wishes she'd read the room. But let's pause here. Read the room? There was no room to read. There were masks, a van, screaming. This wasn't a romantic proposal. It was a scene from a true crime doc, and yet somehow Ryder's the one people are side-eyeing. Like she overreacted. Like she should have known better. How? Seriously. Let's call this what it is. A man staging a fake abduction in public, involving actual fear, and then getting mad when someone reacted like it was real. So, is Ryder the asshole? Let's be real, absolutely not. She responded like any decent, loyal, protective friend would. She didn't ruin a proposal. She saved someone she thought was in danger. Because, let's face it, no sane person sees a masked abduction and goes, "Oh, how romantic." Chris, for all his flair, didn't stop to think about how terrifying this would feel in real life. He didn't check with friends, didn't warn anyone. He gambled on shock value for a proposal and then got shocked when someone actually panicked. Ryder didn't ruin the moment. The moment was doomed from the start because it was deeply misguided. What do you think? Was this just a wild misunderstanding, or was Chris completely out of line? And what would you have done if you were in the writer's shoes? Let me know in the comments. This one? It's messy. Am I the asshole for getting my sister arrested after she destroyed my clothes? At first glance, it sounds dramatic, doesn't it? Getting your own sister arrested? But trust me, this wasn't some heat-of-the-moment sibling squabble. This was sabotage. The writer, a 24-year-old woman, shares a home with her younger sister, 21 years old. A temporary arrangement, both trying to save up and get on their feet. And for a while, it worked. Two sisters under one roof, making it work, living modestly. But lately, the vibe shifted. What used to be eye-roll moments became full-blown tension, and the trigger? Clothes. Now the writer works hard. She earns her own money and occasionally, nothing wild, treats herself. Think Zara, Abercrombie, some designer pieces here and there. Not flashy, not excessive, but clearly enough to spark resentment in her sister. The borrowing started slow, clothes disappearing, showing up crumpled, stretched, stained. The writer spoke up. She set boundaries. even locked her closet. But boundaries mean nothing when the person you live with feels entitled to your space. Her sister broke the lock. Let's stop there. Imagine that. You're working hard, paying your bills by trying to protect your belongings, and your own sibling is breaking into your room. But what came next wasn't petty. It wasn't teenage rebellion. It was destructive, deliberate. Ryder comes home from work, probably tired, probably just wanting a quiet night, and what does she see? A pile of her favorite clothes, slashed, torn, destroyed. Her beloved leather jacket, designer jeans, a silk dress she'd only worn once, all shredded like something out of a horror film. She asks her sister what happened, and the reply? A smirk, followed by, maybe now you'll stop acting like you're better than everyone else. That right there, that wasn't about clothes. That was pure, simmering bitterness, exploding into destruction. And so the writer, finally done being disrespected, calls the police. Not to be dramatic, not to humiliate, but because enough was enough. She wasn't bluffing. She filed a report. She showed the receipts, literal proof of how much those items meant. She showed the broken closet lock, and the police arrested her sister for property damage. Cue the family backlash. You took it too far. She's just a kid. Family shouldn't call the cops on each other. But let's be honest. Just a kid doesn't excuse grown adult behavior. And since when does family mean allowing someone to violate your space, your property, and your trust without consequences? This wasn't a prank. This wasn't some emotional outburst. This was premeditated. It was hurtful, and it crossed a serious line. So, is the writer the asshole for pressing charges against her sister? No. She's the one who had to defend herself when nobody else would. She asked, she warned, she even locked her closet. And still, her sister kept pushing until it finally snapped. Sometimes drawing the line means standing alone. And that doesn't make you heartless. That makes you someone who refuses to be walked all over, even by family. What do you think? Was this the nuclear option or long overdue justice? And would you have reacted the same way? Let me know in the comments. This one hits deep. Am I the asshole for refusing to babysit my husband's kids so he can have some time off? This one walks a razor-thin line between relationship expectations and broken promises. The writer, a 29-year-old woman, married a man, now 34, who came into the relationship with baggage. 3 kids, to be exact. 11, 7, and 6 years old. And not the quiet, bookish kind either. These are full-on chaos agents. The kind of kids that make even seasoned babysitters charge double and say a silent prayer before stepping through the front door. Now, rewind 4 years. When the writer first met her husband, he made one thing crystal clear. He wasn't looking for a second mom for his kids. He had co-parents for that. What he wanted was a partner for himself. And the writer? She respected that. She's not anti-kid, she just knew herself. Motherhood wasn't in the cards. During the dating phase, it all worked fine. The kids were only around on weekends, and the writer kept a respectful distance. No obligations, no surprises. If babysitting was needed, the niece would step in. Everyone knew their role. Boundaries were firm, but time has a funny way of rearranging lives. Flash forward to now, and suddenly custody is 50-50. Week on, week off. The niece, off to college. The husband got a new job, one that pays less. And the babysitter's charging nightmare rates because, again, these kids aren't just a handful, they're the entire armful. Then comes the catalyst, a bachelor party, his best friend's last hurrah, a weekend of booze, strippers, and questionable decisions, and the husband, a groomsman, expected to be there. Last minute, he turns to the writer and says, "Can you watch the kids for the weekend?" Just like that. No prep, no planning, no real discussion. He just assumed she'd do it. And here's the part that really stings. The writer had plans. A gym session, brunch with her mother, a quiet weekend. Nothing dramatic, nothing unmovable. But it wasn't about the schedule, it was the principle. Why should she cancel her weekend to play full-time mom while her husband goes off to party like he's still 21? This wasn't an emergency. It wasn't a crisis, it was convenience for him, so she said no. And suddenly, he was shocked. Like this boundary they'd both agreed on just vanished. He even admitted he thought she might have changed her mind over time. But here's the thing, she didn't. The writer's always been clear, this wasn't a bait and switch. She's supportive. She shows up to the kids' games. She cooks for them. She takes them out sometimes. They like her and she likes them. But she's not their mom. And she's not a backup babysitter for bachelor parties. And honestly, she's right. This isn't about not loving your partner. This is about not being forced into a role you never signed up for just because someone assumes you'll eventually give in. Her husband is their dad. That means sometimes you don't get to drink with the boys. You don't get to party. You parent. That's the deal. So, is the writer the asshole for saying no? Absolutely not. She drew a line in the sand from day one and stuck to it. She's not abandoning anyone. She's holding someone accountable for the very thing they promised they wouldn't ask of her. What do you think? Should she have caved just this once? Or is this exactly why boundaries exist in the first place? Drop your thoughts in the comments. This one's a slow burn, quiet on the surface, but there's a storm just beneath. Am I the asshole for following through on the prenup now that the tables have turned? So let's talk about loyalty, the kind that gets tested not when you have nothing, but when suddenly you have everything to lose. The writer, a 30-year-old woman, entered a new relationship while climbing out of the wreckage of a toxic one. She wasn't bringing much with her, just her child and her car, but she was bringing something far more valuable, the strength to start over. Early on in the relationship, tragedy struck. A serious accident left the writer bedridden, broken bones, multiple surgeries, pain stacked on pain. But in the middle of that chaos, this man, the new partner, offered her a lifeline, a place to heal, a future. He told her he wanted to marry her, that he'd move her and her child into his farmhouse, an inheritance passed down through generations. But there was a condition, a prenuptial agreement. If they married and it didn't work out, she would walk away with what she brought into the relationship. Just her. Nothing from him. Nothing from that farmhouse. And she agreed. Not begrudgingly either. She respected it. The farmhouse was a symbol of legacy for him. She got it, and more than that, she showed she wasn't after his things. No gold digging, no fine print, just love, commitment, and an understanding. But it didn't stop there. A few months later, the man dropped another condition. If he died without biological kids, the farmhouse would go to his brother and sister-in-law, not to her, not even for her child's security. Again, the writer agreed. She accepted this with grace. But then, the ground shifted. Turns out, the accident that left her broken wasn't her fault, not even a little. And as the case moved forward, she discovered she was staring down a multi-million-dollar settlement. We're talking serious life-changing money. Enough to buy a property, care for her child, and build generational wealth of her own. And suddenly, like clockwork, his tone changed. No more talk of prenups, no more worried whispers about family legacy or protecting old property lines. Now, he was asking for an unconditional union. No prenup, no walls, no protections. The timing, let's just say it couldn't have been more transparent. But the writer didn't crumble under pressure. She stood tall. She told him firmly that the prenup stays, not to cut him out, but to safeguard her child's future. She proposed that her new home, purchased with her settlement, would be theirs to live in, but not his to own or pass down if she died. It would be sold when the youngest turned 18. Meanwhile, he could keep his beloved farmhouse untouched. But instead of understanding, he snapped, accused her of being greedy, said she had changed, that the money corrupted her. But let's pause for a second. Who really changed? The woman who honored his need for a prenup when she had nothing? Or the man who's now furious that she wants the same courtesy when she's no longer the one in need? The writer isn't trying to cheat anyone. She's protecting her child. She's thinking long term. She's seen what death and money do to people, how greed can poison even the kindest hearts. She doesn't want her child to end up caught in the crossfire of some inheritance battle. And yet, for that, she's being labeled the villain? Let's be honest. Money didn't corrupt the writer. It revealed the man beside her. So, is she the villain for holding the same line he once insisted on? For protecting what's now hers the same way he once protected what was his? You tell me, because from where I'm sitting, this isn't about being money hungry. It's about knowing your worth. And this time, the writer isn't walking into a future unprotected. Am I the asshole for telling my fiancé I don't want his best man coming to our wedding after what he did at my birthday dinner? Some moments are meant to be sacred. A birthday surrounded by close friends, a wedding on the horizon, vows being written, love in full bloom. But sometimes someone shows up and stomps all over the sacred. The writer, a 29-year-old woman, is engaged to the man she's been with for 4 years. They're planning their wedding. Something intimate, something personal, something filled with meaning. Everything's going smoothly, except for one person. Kyle, her fiancé's best friend, his right-hand man since high school, the kind of guy who hasn't quite moved on from his teenage glory days, stuck in a time loop of beer jokes and bravado. You know the type, the one who thinks he's hilarious, but leaves everyone else wincing. Now, the writer, to her credit, tried to keep the peace, tried to swallow the eye rolls, tried to tell herself Kyle was just goofy, like her fiancé insisted. For 4 years, she bit her tongue, but then came her birthday dinner. A quiet evening, a beautiful restaurant. Friends, family, warmth, her father sitting at the table. And somewhere between the dessert and the casual wedding chatter, her fiancé mentioned they'd be writing their own vows. A sweet moment. And then, Kyle. Loud enough for the entire restaurant to hear, he shouts, "Just don't cry halfway through your vows like you did during your breakup. Remember that?" Silence, heavy, suffocating. Even the forks paused midair. Now here's where it hits deep. That breakup Kyle mocked, it wasn't just a fling gone wrong, it was abusive. It was traumatic. And Kyle knew that. Her fiancé knew that. Her dad was sitting right there. And yet, Kyle thought it was funny. Kyle thought it was funny. The writer laughed in the moment, not because it was funny, but because that's what people do when they've been cornered in public, when they're trying to keep dignity intact in a room full of eyes. She swallowed the embarrassment. She held it down. Later, in private, she told her fiancé how hurt she was. His response? Kyle's just being Kyle. You know how he is, babe. That's not comfort, that's dismissal. So the writer sat on the hurt for days, let it simmer, let it throb, until finally she made a decision. No Kyle at the wedding, no rehearsals, no best man speech, no smug smile standing next to her husband, nothing. This is her wedding, her vow, her future. And the man who mocked her trauma, who couldn't be bothered to show even basic human decency, is not getting a seat at that table. And now, her fiancé says she's overreacting, that asking Kyle to sit this one out would destroy 15 years of friendship. But the writer's asking the real question here. If Kyle can't even respect her, why should he be allowed to stand beside the man she's about to marry? Because this isn't about a joke gone wrong. This is about what that joke revealed. Kyle wasn't being goofy, he was being cruel. And her fiancé defending that, that's a red flag with a loudspeaker. No one should have to beg for dignity at their own wedding. No one should have to explain why they don't want their abuser or someone mocking their trauma anywhere near their most intimate moment. So is the writer wrong for drawing a line in the sand? No, she's doing what Kyle never did, respecting herself. Am I the asshole for telling my dad he has to decide between me attending his wedding and accepting I won't take part in the family unity ceremony, or accepting I won't be there at all? The writer is 17, just 1 month shy of adulthood, but already dealing with emotional baggage most people wouldn't shoulder in a lifetime. And right now, he's being told that not only is his father remarrying, but that he's expected to participate in a family unity ceremony with complete strangers and pretend they're now real siblings. Let's rewind for context, because this isn't just about a wedding. The writer was raised by his dad, just the two of them. His mom, gone before he could even form a memory of her. There was no big extended family, no village, just a boy and his father, and for over a decade, that was the family. But when the writer was around 11, the tone shifted. The father, the same one who had carried the weight of solo parenting, started planting seeds, not of legacy or bonding, but of departure. He told the writer he wanted to travel the world once his son turned 18, that he wanted his own life back, that they might not see each other for years. Let that sink in. Imagine being 11 and hearing your own parent prepare you for the idea that they're done with being a parent in less than a decade. It wasn't just talk, it was repeated, ingrained, hammered into the writer's understanding of what lay ahead. So the writer adjusted, emotionally detached, learned to imagine a life without his dad, not out of bitterness, but out of survival. And then, surprise, a woman enters the picture, a woman with 3 young kids. And suddenly the man who couldn't wait to be free is staying put, parenting again, starting over. Now they're moving in together, planning a wedding, holding a ceremony to symbolize this shiny new blended family. And the writer? He's expected to stand alongside children he barely knows and pretend that none of that emotional abandonment ever happened. But here's the kicker. He doesn't even know their ages. That's how little they know each other. Yet somehow, he's expected to play Big Brother in front of a crowd while everyone pretends this is some heartwarming Brady Bunch moment. And when he says, "No, I don't want to be part of this," his dad pushes. Then the stepmom-to-be chimes in, accusing him of punishing her kids for his dad's mistakes, calling him selfish for not being happy that his father finally decided to stick around, just not for him. Let's be honest here. The emotional whiplash is real. The writer isn't refusing out of spite. He's refusing out of principle, out of self-respect. He's been emotionally preparing to be independent for years. And now he's being asked to pivot into the role of loving big brother and supportive family member. Like everything leading up to this was just erased. And so he draws a line. He tells his dad, either I come to your wedding on my terms or not at all. No family unity ceremony, no stage sentiment, just boundaries. And that is what this is really about. Boundaries. Because sometimes the most mature thing a 17-year-old can do is say, I won't fake a relationship for appearances, especially when I was already pushed to the margins of this family a long time ago. So, is the writer the asshole? No, he's not. He's just a young man standing at the edge of adulthood, choosing not to participate in an emotional charade. He's not cruel. He's not vindictive. He's simply protecting the version of himself that spent years getting ready to be alone and isn't ready to rewrite that narrative for people who just showed up in Act 3. This isn't about being part of a new family. This is about honoring the one that fractured long before the wedding invitations were ever printed. And that is something no ceremony can fix. Am I the asshole? My ex dumped me after 9 years because I wasn't wife material. Now he's suddenly back saying he needs to get something off his chest. I met up with him, and here's what happened. 9 years. Let that sink in. 9 years of memories, growing pains, shared birthdays, inside jokes, and the quiet comfort of someone who knows your coffee order without asking. That's almost a decade of being someone's person. And then, poof. The writer, 27, thoughtful, grounded, and still healing, was dumped in January by her boyfriend of nearly a decade. And why? Because she wasn't wife material, whatever that's supposed to mean. After 9 whole years, he decided she wasn't fit wear the title of wife, that she didn't make the cut. No warning, no mature conversation, just done. So naturally, she did what many do when their world implodes. She tried to pick up the pieces and keep going. Quietly, with dignity. She even went so far as to warn the receptionist at her workplace not to let him through if he ever showed up again, because she knew there would be drama. She just didn't know when. And sure enough, he came crawling back. At first, it was subtle, showing up to her usual spots, her Saturday grocery runs, her Sunday park jogs, not by chance. This was deliberate, calculated. He was circling her life like a shadow trying to get back into the light. Eventually, he caught her at the coffee shop she always visited post-run. The writer saw him and instinctively turned to leave, but something about being out in public made her feel safer. If things went south, at least there were witnesses. So she sat. And what followed was a masterclass in emotional manipulation disguised as remorse. He offered apologies, but they weren't real apologies. They came with strings, with caveats, with "I'm sorry, but," and "I was going through a lot," and the classic pity me angle. He blamed everything and everyone, his mental health, his job, his parents, his friends, everyone, that is, except himself. But the writer? She wasn't buying it. She cut through the nonsense with one line that sliced like a blade. Cut the crap. I already know everything. And you know what? That shook him. Because in that moment, she wasn't the same woman he threw away in January. She was stronger, sharper, done. Done. Then came the truth, the real truth. The reason behind the breakup that he had tried to mask in self-pity. He confessed he'd fallen for a coworker 2 years ago. For 2 entire years, he idealized this woman, admired her, wanted her, and he hated the writer for standing in the way of his fantasy. When he finally ended the relationship, he ran to the coworker, hoping to replace nearly a decade of love with someone who had no idea the writer existed. But karma doesn't always come quietly, because the coworker, she wanted nothing to do with him. She called him a piece of trash and warned him to stay away or she'd report him to HR. That was his great love story, his better option. And now, with his shiny new dream girl rejecting him, he returned to the person he discarded, expecting her to be waiting like an obedient backup plan. He said they belonged together, that they'd get married before the year ends. He even tried to beg, desperate tears, reminders of the good times, empty promises sprinkled with desperation. But the writer, she stood tall. She said no. "I'm nobody's second choice," she told him, and she meant it. Because the truth is, he didn't just waste 9 years, he tried to rewrite their ending to make himself the victim, to romanticize his betrayal as some sort of tragic mistake. But she remembered the cruel words, the rejection, the reality, and she refused to forget just because he changed his mind. He lingered for 20 long minutes, pleading, bargaining, even offering couples therapy, just so he could feel like he still had a say in her life. She ignored him, stood at the counter, talking to baristas, waiting for her cousin to arrive. When she did, her cousin didn't hold back. She told him off with the fire and fury of someone who's seen her loved one hurt one too many times. She warned him that if he even thought about following them, there would be consequences. He stayed, pathetic and defeated, alone in the coffee shop while the writer walked out the door for good. And now, just 1 day later, the writer feels free. No more wondering if he'll show up, no more false hope, no more chains tying her to someone who never really saw her worth. So is the writer the asshole? Absolutely not. She's the survivor of a one-sided love story, the kind where one person builds a future while the other quietly makes an exit plan. She gave years of her life to someone who didn't even respect her enough to be honest. And when he returned, it wasn't because he realized she was the one. It was because the one he wanted didn't want him. There's no greater insult than being someone's fallback option. But the writer didn't take the bait. She didn't entertain the fantasy. She saw him for who he really was and chose herself. This isn't just closure. This is rebirth. And let me tell you, nothing is more powerful than the moment a woman realizes her worth and walks away without looking back. Am I the asshole for leaving my own birthday dinner early after my boyfriend showed up with 3 of his friends uninvited? Birthdays are funny things. They're not just about cake or candles or whatever flavor of cocktails we pretend to like once a year. They're about being seen. For one day, you get to feel a little special, celebrated, chosen. Not in a big flashy way, but in the quiet warmth of being surrounded by the people who actually matter. That's what the writer wanted. Nothing extravagant, no over-the-top surprises, just a table at one of her favorite spots, her 5 closest friends, and the guy she loved. Something intimate, something thoughtful. But some people, they have a remarkable talent for turning someone else's moment into their own stage. The writer, 26, had everything set. A cozy dinner, good food, laughter she could count on, and the kind of company that makes birthdays worth remembering. Then in walks her boyfriend, late, casual, and completely unbothered. But he wasn't alone. 3 of his friends followed behind him like it was his party. No heads up, no check-in. Just a breezy, they didn't have plans, figured it'd be fun. Fun for who though? Because suddenly, this wasn't the writer's dinner anymore. The energy shifted. The staff had to rearrange tables. That sacred small circle she'd envisioned turned into a triangle of inside jokes and loud laughter from people she barely even knew. And her boyfriend? He was holding court, laughing too loud, forgetting she was even there, caught up in whatever made him feel like the center of the room. His friends barely acknowledged her guests. They didn't need to. They weren't there to celebrate the writer. They were there for him. And in that moment, something cracked. It wasn't the kind of scene that causes a loud confrontation or a wine glass tossed across the table. No, it was quieter than that, more painful. The kind of hurt that sits in your throat and makes you shrink. She felt invisible at her own birthday. And that's not just inconsiderate, that's cruel. But still, the writer stayed polite. She smiled, nodded, waited, sat through the ache of watching her own celebration get hijacked until she couldn't anymore. She did something that takes a lot more strength than yelling across a table. She quietly pulled the server aside, paid the bill for everyone, including the party crashers, and stood up. She told her friends goodbye, kindly, warmly. Then she walked out. No scene, no drama, just a woman reclaiming a moment that was already stolen. But of course, the story didn't end there. Later that night, her boyfriend sent her a message. Not to apologize, not to check in, not to ask how she was feeling. No, he accused her of being dramatic, of making him look bad in front of his friends. He said she should have just gone with the flow, that she ruined the night. Ruined it? The writer was erased from her own dinner. Her night, something she planned with care, was rewritten in real time without her consent. And somehow he managed to twist that into her being the problem? Let's talk about what really happened here. This wasn't just poor judgment. This wasn't a harmless surprise. This was a man showing the writer exactly where his priorities were. And it wasn't beside her. It was across the table, laughing with his buddies while she sat on the sidelines at a dinner meant to honor her. The fact that she paid for the whole thing, that she still made sure everyone else was taken care of before leaving, that's not dramatic. That's grace. That's self-respect. And frankly, it's more courtesy than most would give under the circumstances. So, is the writer the asshole for walking out of her own birthday dinner? Not in the slightest. She didn't make a scene. She didn't fight for attention. She didn't even demand an apology on the spot. She did what too many people are afraid to do. She removed herself from a space where she wasn't being valued. And if her boyfriend truly believed going with the flow meant accepting being ignored on her own birthday, well, maybe it's time she started flowing in a different direction. Because when someone shows you they're willing to steal the spotlight from you, even on the one day it's supposed to be yours, believe them. This wasn't just a dinner. It was a wake-up call. And the writer, she didn't ruin anything. She saved what was left of her dignity, and that is worth celebrating. Am I the asshole for breaking up with my boyfriend after he didn't stop when I was hurt? This story isn't an easy one. It's uncomfortable, complicated, and it sits in that gray area that no one really wants to talk about. But it needs to be told, because sometimes the most painful truths are the quiet ones, the ones dressed up as miscommunications, the ones swept aside with a shrug and a "but I thought." The writer is 19 years old. Still new to intimacy, still learning to navigate where boundaries begin and end, not just in her own body, but in her voice too. Her boyfriend is 26. That's 7 years older, 7 years more experience, 7 years more emotional maturity, or at least that's what should be the case. They were in bed. Things started off okay, nothing unusual, but then something shifted. He sped up, and she felt pain. The writer, trying to communicate, said it as clearly and gently as she could. "Hey, slow down, that hurts." Now, pause here for a second. That's not just a comment, that's not banter, that is her asking for care. And yes, he slowed down, but it still didn't help, so she said the words that shouldn't need repeating. "It's really hurting now. Can we stop, please?" What happened next is where the air changes. He paused for just a moment and then dismissed her entirely. "I'm literally about to finish, babe. It feels so good, just give me a second." And then he held her hips, and then he kept going. The writer, stunned, hurting, said it again, but quieter this time. "No, it hurts." But he didn't stop. He went for another 30 seconds, maybe less, maybe more. Time gets strange when something breaks inside you, when you're lying there, stuck between what's happening to your body and the person who's supposed to care for it. And then he finished. Afterward, the writer got up, went to the bathroom in silence. That quiet after a moment like that, it's heavy. It's the kind that sinks into your skin. She didn't scream, she didn't confront, she didn't lash out. She just felt wrong. And when he followed her in, he was smiling. like nothing happened, like it was just another night. He told her he thought she wanted it, that because she didn't push him off or yell, and because she was making noises, he figured she was into it. He said he was so close to finishing, and it felt too good to stop, that she'd do the same if roles were reversed. And that, right there, that's the heart of this. Because what he's describing isn't miscommunication. It's not a little awkward moment in bed. This is a man who heard his partner say no, not once, but multiple times, and chose pleasure over consent. He chose himself over her pain. The writer didn't explode. She didn't post his name online. She didn't even yell. What she did was quietly, firmly make a choice for her safety, her peace, and her body. She left, and she broke up with him. And now she's being told by a friend that it might have been unfair, that it was just a misunderstanding, that maybe she overreacted. But here's what we need to understand. When someone tells you it hurts and please stop, and your response is, I'm almost done, just a second, that is not misunderstanding. That is disregard. That is a person hearing a boundary and stepping over it because they don't want to wait. This isn't about yelling or fighting back or being physically forced. This is about not being heard. This is about being told with actions that your comfort matters less than their satisfaction. So, is the writer the asshole for breaking up with him after what happened? Absolutely not. She did the only thing she could do in that moment. She said no. And when her no wasn't enough, she said it again. And when that didn't matter, she made her final decision with her feet. And to the people saying this was just a misread situation, ask yourself this. If someone tells you they're in pain, and your first instinct is to finish what you're doing because it feels good, what does that say about your character? About your capacity to care? The writer's not just justified in walking away, she's brave for doing it. Because too many people convince themselves that if there's no screaming, no pushing, no fight, then it's fine. That's not the bar. It never should have been the bar. No always means no, even when it's whispered, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it interrupts someone's moment. She isn't dramatic, she isn't cold, she's someone who trusted the wrong person with her body and made the painful, necessary choice not to do it again. And that takes strength. Am I the asshole for turning my sister away, again after she slept with the father of my children, then came to me when he cheated on her and gave her STDs? This cuts deep. Not every betrayal is loud. Sometimes it's quiet. It happens behind your back, in your own home, in the hands of the people you trusted most. And when it finally surfaces, it shatters something in you that never quite gets rebuilt. The writer is 27, a mother, a woman who is building a life with a man, Khan, 29, the father of her 3 children. 8 years. That's nearly a decade of birthdays, holidays, pregnancies, diapers, nights spent dreaming of the future, all with him. And then the truth came out. Her sister, just 1 year younger, sat her down and confessed. She had slept with Khan, not recently, the week before, and she didn't come to own it or to truly take accountability. No, she came asking for reassurance. She said she needed them to be okay. She had a crush, she said. It was a mistake. She got caught up. But let's be real here. What kind of mistake involves crawling into your sister's bed? What kind of accident breaks the bond of blood? Khan didn't deny it. In fact, he doubled down. He admitted it wasn't just a slip-up. He'd been sleeping around for years. And as for the sister, it wasn't a one-time thing. Yet still, she insisted it was. Lied, denied, clung to damage control like it would somehow patch the crater she'd made. So the writer did what any mother with an ounce of self-respect and survival instinct would do. She ended it. Immediately. She didn't scream. She didn't make it theatrical. But she cut. She told her sister she never wanted to see her again, that she was disgusted, repulsed, that whatever guilt she felt, it wasn't enough. Not nearly, because you don't just lose a partner in that kind of betrayal. You lose your person, your family, and then it got worse. The sister? She stayed with Khan. Her reasoning? Because the writer wouldn't forgive her. She needed something good to come out of it. Good? From stealing the father of your nieces and nephews? From tearing your sister's world apart? This wasn't guilt. This was desperation, masked in selfishness. But the writer stayed strong. She went to therapy. She did the work, not to forgive, but to let go of the need to. And her boundary was clear. This relationship was beyond repair. Time passed. Then recently the sister showed up again. Broken. Khan had cheated on her now. And worse, he'd passed on STDs, possibly HIV. Now she was the one betrayed, scared, humiliated. And suddenly, she remembered her sister. She showed up at the writer's door pleading, crying, apologizing, hoping that their shared suffering would be the thing that brought them back together. But here's the thing. Pain doesn't erase betrayal. It doesn't make it easier to trust than who burned you just because they also got burned. So the writer shut the door. No words, no softness, just silence. And when the sister tried again, she wasn't met with silence, she was met with truth. The writer told her exactly how she felt, that she deserved it, that her pain was earned, that her choices had consequences, that she was disgusting, a backstabber, and she could die in a hole for all she cared. Was it harsh? Yes, but sometimes the truth is. And honestly, after everything, what else was left to say? The writer hasn't seen her since. The sister's become a pariah, gossiped about, avoided, cast out by mutual friends. A few people share the writer's rage, but a few, have started whispering that maybe she was too cruel, that she should feel some sympathy, that sisters are forever. But let me ask you this. When your sister tears your life apart and then comes crawling back only because she's hurting, not because she truly changed, do you owe her comfort? The writer doesn't feel guilt, not a sliver, and she shouldn't. This wasn't some petty feud. This wasn't a fight over money or borrowed clothes or a misunderstanding. This was betrayal, raw, intimate, unforgivable betrayal. And when someone shows you who they really are in your darkest moment, you believe them. So, is the writer the asshole for turning her sister away again after all of this? Absolutely, unequivocally. No, she's someone who stood up for herself after being wrecked by the two people she should have been able to trust the most. And she's not required to extend grace to someone who only came crawling back because karma finally caught up. Sometimes you don't heal by reopening the wound. You heal by making damn sure it never gets cut again. And that's exactly what the writer did. Am I the asshole for giving my husband a pregnancy test as a birthday gift? At first glance, this question might seem odd, almost innocent, but dig a little deeper and it becomes a lot more complicated. The writer is 23, her husband 25, married for 4 years, young but committed. They've dreamed about this, parenthood, since the beginning. Not a surprise baby, not an oops, a planned, longed-for future, and that dream just became reality. The writer found out she was pregnant, and in that moment, her heart exploded with joy, and as timing would have it, her husband's birthday was only a few days away, so she made a decision, one she truly thought was sweet, thoughtful, memorable. She didn't want to make a big announcement on Instagram or in a crowded room. No balloons, no elaborate schemes, just a quiet moment between two people who were building a life together. The plan? Wrap the positive pregnancy test and give it to him with his other gifts. A personal, emotional surprise. A moment she imagined would light up his whole world. But when the moment came, something was off. He opened his other gifts first, smiled, laughed, warm, easy happiness. Then he reached for the last box, and when he opened it, the joy disappeared. His face changed, not in shock, not in awe, but in disappointment, anger even. He called it a stupid gift, said, "How could you hide something like this from me?" He made her feel like she'd betrayed him, not celebrated him. Now here's where emotions start to blur. From the outside, it's easy to say it was only 3 days, come on. But this wasn't about the timeline, this was about expectation. His expectation of how such a huge, life-altering moment should be handled. And maybe that's the tragic disconnect here. Because while the writer saw this as a sweet surprise to honor their shared dream, her husband saw it as a hijack of his day, his birthday, as if her joyful news somehow stole the spotlight. And from that point on, the cold shoulder began. No congratulations, no questions, no excitement, not even a flicker of curiosity about their baby. Just silence, grunts, dismissals. That night he slept on the couch, and for the entire week after, it's like the air between them froze over. Let's stop here for a second. Because this isn't about who gave who what gift. This is about communication. It's about hurt feelings that never got unpacked, about emotional landmines no one saw coming. And you can feel it in the writer's voice. This wasn't done out of malice. There was no manipulation. She wasn't trying to make it about her. She was trying to give him a memory, a surprise, a moment between just them. And now she's left doubting herself entirely. Was she the villain for trying to make him smile? The writer even clarifies some things, important ones. This wasn't some secret pregnancy sprung on him out of nowhere. They wanted this baby. They'd been trying. She didn't tell anyone else. It was just them, in their own space, away from the world. So why the anger? That's the piece that hurts the most. Not just his reaction, but the lack of recovery. He never came back to say, okay, maybe I overreacted. He never softened, never held her and said, I'm sorry, this is amazing. We're going to be parents. Instead, he punished her with silence, with distance, with the cruel suggestion that her beautiful news was dumb. Dumb. And now the writer is left alone, pregnant, confused, and afraid. She doesn't want to leave. She doesn't want an abortion. She wants to fix this, but has no clue how. So now I ask, is the writer the asshole for giving her husband a pregnancy test as a birthday gift? No, she's not. She's a young woman who thought she was giving joy, who wrapped up the very thing they'd both been hoping for and presented it in love. Her only mistake was not anticipating the emotional minefield it would create. But that doesn't make her cruel. That doesn't make her manipulative. That doesn't make her the bad guy. Sometimes when people are hit with overwhelming emotion, even good news, they don't always react the way you expect, but is what happens next, how they make it right, how they hold you afterward and say, I'm sorry I hurt you. The silence here is louder than any argument. And if her husband doesn't step forward soon to be her partner again, this pregnancy is going to feel a lot lonelier than it should. So no, writer, you are not the asshole. You gave a gift full of hope. It's not your fault he didn't know what to do with it. Am I the asshole for telling my sister to find another babysitter after she said I don't know real stress because I don't have kids? All right, picture this. The writer is 30. No kids, no chaos, no constant background noise of screaming, spilled juice, or sticky fingers on every surface. Just peace, clean floors, a steady income, sleep that actually restores her soul. The kind of life people talk about when they say, I need a break. But not everyone sees that as valid, especially not her sister. 33 years old, married, and deep in the trenches of toddler warfare with 3 kids under the age of 7. Now, the writer's sister reaches out, wants to escape for the weekend with her husband. Recharge. Fair enough. Parenting is brutal, exhausting, all-consuming. She asks the writer to babysit. But instead of asking with kindness, instead of being grateful for even the possibility, she throws a jab. I mean, it's not like you got anything going on. You don't have kids, you're probably just chilling anyway. And just like that, the ask became an insult. The writer is standing there, peaceful, child-free, thriving, and her sister basically says, you don't have a real life. Your responsibilities don't count. And look, that kind of disrespect casually dropped in the middle of a favor request, that'll make anyone pause. This wasn't just about babysitting. This was about validation, about respect, about the assumption that if you don't have kids, your time must be disposable. So the writer, calmly but firmly, shut it down. Nah, you can find someone else since my chill life apparently ain't stressful enough to be respected. And honestly, that was a boundary. Clear, simple, deserved, but oh, the fallout. Now the sister is furious, running to the family, playing the damsel drowning in diapers, telling everyone the writer abandoned her when she clearly needed help, as if the writer is some sort of unpaid nanny who just happens to be well-rested and nearby. Let's talk about that for a second. Why is it that people with kids sometimes act like those without owe them free labor, as if having children makes your exhaustion more important than someone else's peace? Sure, being a parent is hard, but that doesn't mean the rest of us are just floating around stress-free with nothing but free time and clean countertops. And the writer's not being cold. She's not throwing her nieces and nephews to the wolves. She's setting a boundary because she was disrespected. The moment her lifestyle was belittled, The favor became a transaction laced with entitlement. Then comes mom, trying to play peacemaker. It's for the kids. Yes, but it's also about how we treat people. The writer isn't saying she'll never help. She's saying respect me first. A babysitter is not a vending machine. You don't press the button and get a favor while spitting out insults. And let's be real, this wasn't the first time the sister pulled the mom martyr card. You can feel it between the lines. That subtle bitterness. Like deep down, the sister resents the writer's freedom, so she masks it as superiority. But resentment isn't a good enough reason to disrespect someone who's actually willing to help you. So no. The writer is not the asshole. She's not selfish for protecting her time. She's not cruel for saying no to someone who came at her sideways. And she's definitely not obligated to put her life on hold because someone else made different choices. The writer set a boundary, and if that boundary makes waves in the family group chat, maybe they should ask themselves why they think being child-free means being available on demand. Sometimes the soft life has to get loud when people stop listening, and in this case, the silence said it all. Not the asshole, not even close. Am I the asshole for not letting my dad meet my newborn daughter even though he's changed? This one cuts deep, because it isn't about revenge. It isn't about holding grudges or being stubborn. It's about protection. The writer, a 29-year-old new mother, has just entered the most vulnerable, transformative chapter of her life. 2 weeks postpartum, raw, healing, overwhelmed, and instead of basking in the quiet joy of her daughter's arrival, she's being dragged back into a storm she spent years escaping. Let's rewind. Her father, 55 now, but age doesn't wash away the past. He was never physically violent to her, but violence doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes it comes with broken plates, slammed doors, and a voice that makes your stomach twist before it even reaches your ears. He ruled their home like a dictator with a fragile ego, exploding over nothing, punishing without cause, and the worst part, he'd gaslight the pain right out of you. Stop being dramatic, start being better. The writer remembers standing in the rain at 12 years old, cold, humiliated, just for getting a B on a math test. That wasn't parenting. That was cruelty dressed up as discipline. By 20, she was gone, no contact. A boundary drawn not in anger, but in survival. And it worked. She spent the next 9 years in therapy, rebuilding herself from the pieces he left behind. But now there's a baby. A soft, innocent little girl who hasn't felt fear yet, who doesn't jump when someone raises their voice, who knows nothing of control or conditional love. And suddenly, the man who shattered the writer's childhood wants to walk back in. 2 years sober, he says. He's changed. But has he apologized? Has he acknowledged even one of the things he did? The birthday cards and voicemails aren't accountability. They're a performance. Like showing up uninvited to her old apartment, pretending the past never happened. And then after a quiet Facebook birth announcement, he comments, "Can't wait to meet my granddaughter." Like it's a given. Like years of damage can be skipped over with a few words typed under a baby photo. The writer stays silent. She knows this game. But then comes the guilt campaign. Her aunt, her cousins, even a cousin throwing a cheap shot. If you're so healed, why are you still holding a grudge? And that's the part that stings. Because healing doesn't mean opening your arms to the same fire that burned you. It means choosing differently. It means protecting the peace you fought for. And sometimes it means saying no, even when the whole room calls you cold. The writer isn't being cruel. She's being careful. She's not punishing her father. She's protecting her daughter. And that line matters. Because when you've grown up with someone who twists reality, who lashes out and then plays the victim, you learn that even a small crack in the wall can let the chaos pour back in. And the writer? She refuses to let that happen again, especially not to her child. Not while that little girl is still safe, still soft, still untouched by the kind of damage that takes a decade to undo. So is she the asshole? No, she's a mother, a fierce, cautious, trauma-informed mother who is not willing to gamble her child's emotional safety on someone else's "I've changed." Maybe one day there will be a reckoning, a real apology, a sincere effort rooted in humility, not guilt. But until then, the door stays closed. And honestly, that's not heartless. That's brave, not the asshole, not even close. Am I the asshole for telling my mom she can bill me using the tuition money she stole from me? Let's take a moment to understand the kind of betrayal we're talking about here. The writer, 33 now, was on the edge of adulthood, gearing up for university. A moment that should have marked the beginning of independence, of growth, of something bigger. But instead, it came with a confession that knocked the air out of him. There was no tuition money, because his own mother spent it. His dad had been handing her cash over the years, money that was meant for the writer's education, a future fund, a promise, and she just used it like it meant nothing. Like her son's entire path forward was something she could casually toss aside. And what's worse, she had the nerve to ask him to keep it quiet. Don't tell your dad. I'll pay you back. Empty words. Words that echo louder than silence because he carried the weight of them for 4 years, smiling, thanking his parents for covering tuition while he sank into student debt and resentment, all to protect her lie. And now, years later, she wants him to pay up, not for something urgent, not for something selfless, but for the cottage. That cottage, her prized possession, her little sanctuary. She spends 90 days a year there, yet still feels entitled to nickel and dime the writer for a few summer visits with his girlfriend. She actually asks him for $1,000, like he hasn't already paid more than his fair share. So the writer hits her with the truth she's tried so hard to bury. You can take it out of the tuition money you owe me. That wasn't a threat, that was a receipt. But of course, she can't handle that. She lashes out in a text, calling him manipulative, says he's weaponizing the past, as if the past were some ancient, irrelevant thing, not the reason he had to claw his way through university while pretending everything was fine. But here's what sticks. The writer isn't angry about just one thing. He's hurt that his mother never simply did a kind thing for him. No strings, no guilt, no conditions, just once. He's hurt that the only version of love he got from her came with fine print. And maybe he's also realizing he's not over the tuition betrayal, because how could he be? It wasn't just money, it was trust. It was the feeling of being protected, safe, valued. And instead, he was handed a lifetime of emotional gymnastics, keeping secrets, avoiding conflict, nodding and smiling through her monologues just to keep the peace. That isn't healing, that's surviving. So now, when he finally stands up and holds up the mirror, suddenly he's the problem? No, he didn't pick this fight. He just stopped pretending it wasn't happening. He stopped being the quiet, agreeable son who let her rewrite history. And frankly, asking him to pay for cottage maintenance is bold. But expecting it without acknowledging the thousands she took from him is absolutely wild. Let's call it what it is. She's upset that the writer remembered what she hoped he'd forget. So is the writer the asshole for bringing up ancient history? Not even close. That ancient history is still collecting interest, and it's about damn time someone sent her the bill. Am I the asshole for not telling my friend the volunteer gig he flaked on was actually paid? So here's the setup. The writer, 23, sharp, just trying to carve out a place in the engineering world, sees a post from the department. Local tech conference needs volunteers for logistics. Seems like one of those you never know who you'll meet kind of deals. So the writer signs up. Not just that, he even tells his friend Ryan about it. Same age, same field, probably sitting in the same lectures week after week. They're on the same grind, but Ryan, he takes one look at it and goes, not worth the time unless they're paying. That's it. Dismisses it. Closed door. Now pause right there. That was the moment. That was Ryan deciding he knew better. That he didn't need to show up for something unless it had a price tag attached. But life has a funny way of paying off the bets you don't expect. Because when the writer shows up to this volunteer thing, he gets a badge, food vouchers, and oh yeah, a surprise $300 stipend. That's not pennies, that's rent money, textbook money, groceries for the week. So Ryan shoots him a text while he's working the event. Yo, how's it going? The writer plays it chill. Not bad, chill so far. No big reveal, no fanfare, just low-key vibes because, let's be honest, he didn't even know about the money when he signed up. He didn't lie, he didn't bait and switch, he just didn't over-explain. Then, after the event, the writer posts a photo with the crew. Just a little moment of pride of, hey, I showed up and did something kind of cool. Ryan sees it. notices the details, starts asking questions. Wait, you got paid? And that's when it flips. Ryan goes full meltdown, accuses the writer of being shady, says he would have gone if he'd known that the writer knew he needed the cash. Suddenly, it's not about a missed opportunity, it's about betrayal. He even tells other people that the writer set him up. Set him up? Set him up? Really? Let's rewind this. The writer gave him the info, the opportunity, told him exactly what it was. Ryan made the call to stay home. He rolled the dice that it wasn't worth it, and now he's mad that the outcome wasn't what he predicted. That's not betrayal. That's buyer's remorse. The truth is, Ryan didn't want to take a chance unless the reward was guaranteed. But in real life, the people who win aren't always the ones who wait for perfect conditions. They're the ones who show up anyway. The writer didn't owe him a second sales pitch. He wasn't gatekeeping a treasure chest. He just followed through on something Ryan tossed aside. So, is the writer the asshole for not rushing to tell his friend after the fact? Absolutely not. He gave Ryan the door. Ryan chose not to walk through it. Sometimes people want you to carry them through opportunities they weren't willing to reach for themselves, but that's not your burden. You didn't set him up. He sat himself out. Am I the asshole for sending footage of my neighbor's husband sneaking into another woman's house? All right, so picture this. It's quiet, middle of the night, the kind of stillness that only hits around 2 a.m. when the world is asleep and nothing should be moving. But the writer's security camera picks up motion. And what do they see? Not some raccoon, not a delivery truck. No, it's the neighbor's husband, creeping around like he's auditioning for a role in a crime drama. Hoodie up, head down, slipping through the alley and straight into the side door of the divorced woman's house across the street. And look, the writer didn't rush to conclusions, didn't go gossiping. They sat on it, let it be. Because what grown man does at 2 a.m., even if it's shady, is technically not the writer's problem. But fate, as it always does, had other plans. A week later, the neighbor's wife, someone the writer's always gotten along with, shows up with heavy eyes and a heavier question. Do you think my husband's cheating? Now stop right there. That's no light question. That's the sound of a woman teetering on the edge of something she already knows deep down, but needs confirmation to face. The writer doesn't jump to say yes. They ask, do you want me to check? Because that moment matters. That's not just about footage, that's about consent, truth, and emotional fallout. And when the clip plays, it's heartbreak on full display. She breaks down in the writer's kitchen, tears, shaking, that quiet kind of sobbing that only comes when the illusion of your life just shattered at your feet. Now, here's where it flips. Her husband finds out, and instead of shame or regret, he goes full scorched earth, threatens legal action, accuses the writer of spying, of ruining his marriage. Ruining it? Sir, you ruined it the second you chose to slip through that alley like a ghost. Now the neighborhood's divided. Some say the writer should have stayed out of it, should have zipped it, pretended they saw nothing. But let's be real. What would you do if someone came to you broken asking if the person they built a life with was lying to their face? The writer didn't volunteer gossip. They didn't blast it around the block. They answered a question they were directly asked by someone in pain, looking for the truth. And maybe the hardest truth here is that telling the truth still makes you the villain in some people's stories, especially when it's a story they've been desperate to keep hidden. So, is the writer the asshole for showing her the footage? Absolutely not. You don't break a marriage by revealing the truth. You break it by cheating in the dead of night and expecting silence from everyone around you. The writer didn't break his vows. He did. They just turned on the lights. Am I the asshole for not wanting to invite my best friend and his wife to my wedding after they hid theirs from me? Let's talk about betrayal. The kind that doesn't scream. The kind that tiptoes in quietly, disguised as distance. A slow silence that grows until suddenly you realize you were never included. The writer is 29, a woman on the cusp of her own wedding, a time that should feel like everything is coming together. love, celebration, connection, but instead something is unraveling. She has this best friend, more than a best friend, really. He's been like a brother her whole life, her emotional constant. The kind of friend that doesn't just show up for the big things, but is there in the background of everything. Relationships, heartbreaks, holidays, long calls for no reason. That person. So imagine this. Last year, in December, a close friend of the writer comes to visit from another country. Just a visit. Nothing dramatic. She introduces her to this lifelong friend, casually, like you do when you want two good people to meet. A little spark flies. They hook up. No big deal. The writer thinks it's just a fling, but it wasn't. Things escalate quickly, they get serious. But they don't just keep it private, they keep it secret. Not only from the writer, but from family. And then out of nowhere, they get engaged, married in Bali, no call, no heads up, not even a post, just gone. And how does the writer find out? Not from a cute photo or a text, from his mother, crying, shocked, heartbroken. This woman, this mother, calls the writer because she's the only one she trusts to make sense of what's happened. Her son said he was going on vacation and he came back a married man. That's when it hits you, right? That the people closest to you chose to shut the door and didn't even think to check if it hurt you. And while the writer is still trying to catch her breath to process that punch to the gut, guess who starts calling? The newlyweds, but not to apologize, not to explain. No. They start dumping marital problems on her lap like she's the emotional janitor here to clean up their mess. And it's not just any day they do this on, it's her birthday, a day they forget. No message, no call, no thought. But somehow they remember to ring her up to settle a fight about food. Think about that. Imagine how small that would make you feel. Even then, the writer tries. She steps up, tries to mediate twice, and even tells them how hurt she is that they kept their wedding a secret. They say sorry. They claim it was private. They thank her for introducing them, but then comes the real kicker. They say they didn't invite anyone from her country because the bride's family feels conscious around people from there. Except her family was invited. His wasn't. The writer wasn't. How do you process that? What does that even mean? That your culture makes them uncomfortable, like so you're uninvited from your own best friend's wedding? And now, things are different. The writer feels it. The friendship, once solid and unshakable, is starting to feel hollow, like she's been standing on the foundation of something that was never as mutual as she thought. So she does something small but powerful. She sets a boundary. She stops answering the late-night crisis calls, stops playing mediator, stops showing up for people who only remember her when it's convenient. She steps away, not with hate, but with a quiet kind of sadness, a realization that the door they closed might need to stay that way. And now the writer is planning her own wedding, her day, her moment. And for the first time, she's asking herself a question she never thought she'd consider. Should they even be invited? Not to be spiteful, not to get even. But because, why should they get a seat at a table they didn't think she deserved? But then they call again, crying, apologizing, saying they miss her, that they were selfish, that they want to reconnect. And here's where it gets complicated, because when someone you love tells you they're sorry, a part of you wants to forgive. A part of you wants to believe they've changed, that maybe it was just a lapse in judgment, that maybe you can go back to how things were. But another part, the part that's grown wiser, more self-protective, knows better. That apologies don't erase the loneliness you felt, that just because someone feels bad now doesn't mean they valued you then. So the writer chooses honesty. She tells them she's busy, and she doesn't bring up the wedding. Because maybe for the first time she's choosing herself, choosing peace, choosing not to pour herself into a cup that was never full to begin with. So, is the writer the asshole for not wanting to include them in her wedding? No. This isn't about revenge. This isn't about being petty. It's about emotional survival, about honoring the hurt and refusing to hand your vulnerability back to people who dropped it the first chance they got. They made their choices. And now, the writer is making hers. And honestly, it's about time. Am I the asshole after I told my boyfriend to fuck off because he kept bothering me about getting a clit piercing? You ever feel like your no is just background noise to someone? Like they hear it, but they don't listen? The writer has been in a relationship for about 6 months, new enough to still be figuring each other out, but long enough that basic respect should not be up for negotiation. And at first, things were good, solid even, until her boyfriend, someone she thought had her best interests at heart, started pushing a very specific request. He wanted her to get a clit piercing. Let that sink in for a second. Now, let's be clear, there's no judgment on body modifications. People have their preferences, their kinks, and that's fine. But the problem here? Consent, pressure, repeated boundary pushing. The writer shut it down early. Clearly, she said no, politely, firmly. Explained that it's a risky procedure, that it needs to be done by someone extremely qualified. But he didn't back off. He didn't say, okay, cool, thanks for telling me how you feel. No, instead he kept poking. After sex, he'd bring it up again. During casual conversation, he'd circle back. He even tried to dress it up, said it'd be hot, sexy, that it'd turn him on. Called her no fun. Threw in a weird comment about a bad girl fetish, like she's supposed to read his mind and mold her body to match some fantasy he hasn't even explained. And despite all this, the writer stayed calm. Tried to explain again and again. Tried to set the line without burning the bridge. But then came the moment. The one that snaps your patience in half. They were with friends. A social setting. Light vibes, laughter, nothing serious. And this man, who has been pestering her for months about a piercing she clearly doesn't want, decides it's the perfect time to bring it up again, loudly, publicly, in front of everyone. So how about that clit piercing appointment? Just wow. That wasn't a suggestion. That wasn't a joke. That was control disguised as a joke. It was humiliation dressed in a smirk. The writer snapped, and who wouldn't? She stood up. She told him off. Loud, sharp, honest. She told him she wouldn't be opening her legs for someone who keeps reducing her to a fetish. It turned into a screaming match. Emotions spilled. Friends watched in stunned silence. And the writer left, but that wasn't the end. One of her male friends later pulled her aside and said, maybe that was a bit much. Men have needs too. Needs is someone's need to see you permanently alter your genitals without wanting to respect your consent. A need? Or is it just entitlement wearing a victim's mask? Now here's where it turns from uncomfortable to downright scary. The update. The boyfriend finally reaches out, says he'll drop it if she comes home. That's not an apology. That's a negotiation. That's I still think I'm in charge. And the writer's done. She tells him they're over. What happens next? He loses it. Full-on scream crying, breaking things in the background. Classic signs of someone who thinks they're owed control over you and can't handle losing it. And then he shows up to her friend's house, starts banging on the door like some horror movie scene, yelling, demanding she come out, kicking the door, screaming about how it's not just the piercing, that she always shuts down his ideas, like painting her kitchen all white, selling their car, getting a dog, even though the writer is allergic, as if his ideas matter more than her autonomy, her health, her home. And when the door finally gives way and breaks, the police are called. Her friend takes him to court. He gets arrested. And what's the last thing he says to her? Calls her a bitch. Because of course. Because when someone like that realizes they can't control you anymore, they try to reduce you with one last insult, one final attempt to hurt. So, is the writer the asshole? Absolutely not. This wasn't about a piercing. This wasn't even about sex. This was about control, pressure, and the slow, persistent erasure of boundaries. The writer was polite, clear, patient, too patient, honestly. And when that wasn't enough, when no stopped being respected, she had every right to raise her voice. Some people only understand boundaries when they're shouted, and in this case, shouting might have just saved her from something far darker down the road. Choosing yourself doesn't make you the asshole. It makes you free. Am I the asshole for refusing to get rid of my dog because my Muslim girlfriend asked me to? Sometimes a relationship starts with chemistry. You meet someone. There's a spark, a laugh across the table, a smile that lingers longer than it should. And sometimes that spark grows, but it flickers fast when it runs headfirst into something immovable, like a line you just won't cross. The writer met a woman in Canada, an Egyptian woman, charming, intriguing, mysterious in that late night bar car kind of way. They clicked. Conversation flowed, drinks were shared, and he made no secret about the fact that he had a pug. Pictures were shown, a cute was offered, nothing more. Seemed like no big deal. Fast forward to date number 3. That moment when you bring someone home for the first time. It's a quiet kind of intimacy, a test. She walks into his place and there's the pug, soft, snorting, probably waddling around in that funny little pug way. But she doesn't really engage with the dog, doesn't pet her, doesn't acknowledge her. The writer thinks, okay, maybe she's just not a dog person. No big deal. She doesn't want the pug in the room while they hook up? Fine, reasonable. But then comes the 4th date. Things get serious. They're talking about next steps, real commitment, future stuff. And that's when she lays it out. She wants to be with the writer, but the pug has to go, not just stay out of the bedroom. Gone. Why? Because according to her religious beliefs, dogs are considered unclean, particularly their saliva, a long-standing cultural and religious view held by many Muslims. And here's where things get complicated. The writer is blindsided. This isn't a minor lifestyle disagreement. This is her asking him to part ways with a companion he's loved for 9 years. A dog that's more than just a pet. A dog that's curled up next to him through heartbreak, through joy, through sleepy Sunday mornings. A dog he once paid $5,000 to save when her life was on the line. We're not talking about an accessory, we're talking about family. And in that moment, something in him just snapped. He laughed, got up, left the restaurant, no long speech, no drawn-out argument. He just walked out, went home, laid down next to his pug, the one living being in his life who's never demanded anything more than love and kibble. Now, the writer isn't making fun of her beliefs. He isn't demonizing her culture. He's just stunned that after weeks of dating, after multiple nights together, she drops a condition so massive it rewrites the entire relationship. Get rid of your dog, or lose me. It's a hard ask, and one he never saw coming. Let's be honest, relationships are all about compromise. You learn to adjust, to bend a little, but there are some things you just don't compromise on. And when someone draws a line in the sand that cuts straight through something as emotionally significant as your pet, you have every right to choose your peace. Because this isn't about choosing a dog over a person. This is about someone asking you to amputate a piece of your heart and expecting you to do it quietly as proof of love. The writer didn't yell, he didn't argue, he just chose the living, breathing creature who's been at his side for nearly a decade. So, is the writer the asshole? No, he's not. The truth is, some people will never understand what it's like to bond with an animal that way, to call them family, to carry the weight of their pain and celebrate their joy. But if someone doesn't understand that, it's not your job to convince them. The writer didn't shame her for her beliefs. He didn't ask her to change. He just realized, in that restaurant, in that moment, that he couldn't sacrifice something so sacred to him just to make someone else feel comfortable. And that's okay. Sometimes love means walking away, not because you don't care, but because you do, about yourself, your peace, and the loyal creature who's been sleeping beside you all these years. So, no, the writer's not the asshole. He's just a man who refused to trade loyalty for love. And honestly, maybe that's the kind of loyalty we should all be looking for.